Marietta Street was almost a lane of barrooms. A cotton factory was at the corner of Bartow and Marietta Streets. The operators lived all around the neighborhood in unthinkable housing conditions. Some over or behind stores, some over barrooms, and one I knew even in a cellar. The First Methodist Church planned to open a mission in this district, but evil influences were too strong, and no hall or room could be rented for such a purpose. Mr. Dave Wiley, a railroad official, offered a passenger coach on a side track. There, the Barclay Mission came into being with 7 pupils. And, by the way, all 7 of these have made good in life. Miss Sue Holloway, city social worker, 1888.
The late 1800s saw a new South emerging. Atlanta was a hub of activity. New businesses were thriving. Industry was beginning to boom, and groundwork was being laid for family fortunes. The mule-drawn streetcars were replaced by electrified trolleys. The new Grady Hospital opened. Victorian mansions were built. The face of the city was changing. Atlanta was alive again. Despite the growth and progress, social inequities remained and poverty grew. This forced another change. Many women were working outside the home. They worked long hours in the cotton mills, earning meager wages to support their families. Aware of the desperate situation, ladies from the Barclay Mission on Marietta Street, led by Mrs. Preston Arkwright, formed a sewing circle to make clothes for the children. On one of their visits to deliver clothes, Mrs. Arkwright and Mrs. Patterson discovered a child tied to the foot of a bed as a safety measure while the mother worked in the mill. The ladies found many children unattended while the mothers worked. So the sewing circle began minding the children in the Boxcar Mission.
It was a blessing when Mr. Barclay rented the old Chisholm home on Marietta Street for the mission. There were extra rooms in the basement for the day nursery. We all pledged money for the salary of a matron. The hotels promised food, and a bakery gave day-old bread. It was at this time that we took on the name of Sheltering Arms. Mrs. Preston Arkwright, 1890.
Word spread of the help Sheltering Arms offered. The number of children and mothers in need increased, and the community rallied to assist the growing numbers of Atlanta's working poor. Mr. William Hemphill of the Atlanta Constitution gave the Barclay Mission a piece of property on Walton Street in memory of his brother-in-law, Osgood Sanders. In turn, the property was deeded to Sheltering Arms, and in 1896, the Osgood Sanders Day Nursery was built. In 1926, the nursery expanded and moved to Baker Street, where it remains in operation today. Sheltering Arms was totally supported through donations from the community. In 1908, the first official fundraiser was organized, known as Tag Day. Taggers stood on every street in Atlanta, and when the donations were dropped in their bonnets, a heart-shaped tag was given to the donor. During the early 1900s, 3 other day nurseries were opened. The John Barclay Nursery at the Exposition Mills on Marietta Street, the Gate City Cotton Mills Nursery in East Point, and the Cecilia Willingham Day Nursery at the Piedmont Mills in College Park. These were operated by Sheltering Arms Association for a time and then turned over to the mills, becoming a forerunner of today's corporate daycare. The Cornelia Moore Day Nursery was founded by the Order of Old-Fashioned Women as a memorial to the young daughter of one of its members. By 1915, daycare was being looked at on a national scale. Networks were set up to share ideas and techniques on properly operating a day nursery. And the National Federation of Day Nurseries was organized to set standards and guidelines. Mrs. Dorothy Arkwright was elected the first president of the Southern Branch. Sheltering Arms became a model for other areas in the country. The next 2 decades brought more change and more demand for someone to mind the children. By the 1940s, with the world at war, American mothers became the workforce.
With the war has come the recognition of the importance of day nurseries, and the spotlight has been upon them. The need has been realized for wise community planning and for the further evaluation of programs. A day nursery which is soundly planned will without question help win the war. It will protect and safeguard children and preserve their family life. The task of rebuilding the world will fall upon today's children. It is one of our most urgent responsibilities to prepare them for their task. Mrs. Ralph Paris, President, 1942.
The 50s characteristically became known as happy days. Americans enjoyed an easygoing, uncomplicated lifestyle, unless you were one of the nearly 6 million mothers in the United States employed outside the home. This became a subject of national concern. Once again, the question was asked, who's minding the children?
In Fulton County, there are approximately 100 licensed day nurseries. This number is not always adequate. Also, parents want to know if the nursery they take their children to is good. I recommend that parents visit different nurseries and talk with the workers. Try and get a good sense of the safety and health provisions for the children. Also, see if the children seem happy during the day. Dr. J.F. Hackney, Fulton County Health Department, 1953.
Sheltering Arms, along with other daycare providers, was striving to address the growing need of child care for working mothers. The first for-profit child care company, KinderCare, was formed. Daycare was beginning to come under closer scrutiny. Although national standards had been outlined many years earlier by the Child Welfare League of America, it wasn't until the late 1960s that licensing standards of Georgia were formulated. The 1960s brought a turbulence to the country that shook the fabric of the nation. The country was again divided in the wake of civil rights and social injustice. The children were at the heart of the matter. Battles raged over school desegregation and busing. Coupled with the unsettled feelings over the Vietnam War, the implications of the 60s would affect the country for generations to come. As we warred with ourselves, there was still the question, who's minding the children? The 1970s brought inflation, creating additional problems for women trying to support their families. The number of women who were the sole wage earners drastically increased. Child care became big business as for-profit centers opened in increasing numbers to meet the rising need. More and more churches offered child care programs. In Atlanta, Sheltering Arms expanded from 2 centers to 7. The next decade brought overwhelming demands for child care. 63% of mothers were in the workforce. Over half of these were single parents, the only wage earner with an income of less than $15,000 a year. The economy plummeted as the 80s ended, creating additional difficulty in addressing the century-old dilemma, who's minding the children?
If we don't soon figure out how we're going to mind the children so that our parents can be productive workers in our society, then our economy very quickly is going to collapse. Most people don't necessarily associate child care as an economic issue, but it certainly is. If these parents, especially the parents that we deal with, are predominantly single mothers, if they cannot be in the workforce, their only choice is to be on welfare.
I really get sick and tired of listening to politicians talk about, our future and how we need to look after our children, but yet and still they're always looking at an opportunity to cut and reduce and not increase finances necessary for us to teach and work with our children.
Wake up, pay attention to what's happening to the children. They're not a constituency, they don't vote, but they are the most important faction of any society.
If children are coming unclothed or unfed or abused, the effects those conditions are going to have on education are going to be disastrous.
We fix it with an entitlement to child care first, and an entitlement to housing first, and an entitlement to health care first. Those 3 things for women with children are absolutely necessary. for everybody in this country, and there are ways to do it. There are people much smarter and better prepared than I am to respond to that issue who have proven that it's affordable and cost-effective to do it.
1 out of every 5 children lives in poverty. More than 12 million children and 14 million women of childbearing age have no health insurance. Every night, 100,000 children go to bed homeless. 2 out of every 5 teenage girls becomes pregnant. 500,000 children drop out of school each year. There is no national policy on child care or education. Many other industrialized countries have national policies placing emphasis on the development and welfare of young children. A recent study of all the states indicated that Georgia ranked last, number 50, in the quality of life for children across the board.
We're going to address it by making it absolutely known that children are a priority. For a long time, there's been a small group of folks who've said, children, children, children. But I'm convinced the day is coming that the business of Georgia, the people who are involved in looking for employees, the folks who are trying to decide if they're going to come to Georgia to make this their business home, are going to be asking us incredibly tough questions. And until Georgia says children are a priority and how we treat them is important, and then does something about it.
We face a complex and fragmented situation. The issues we face as a state in addressing the needs of children are enormous, with no simple answers or easy solutions. Child care is one of the greatest concerns. By 1995, it's predicted that 2 out of 3 preschool children and 4 out of 5 school-age children will need outside child care. Children from all segments of society. If mom isn't home, who's minding the children?
There is a wide variety of things available in the child care area in this state. A parent can pretty much find what they're looking for if they're able to pay for it.
Georgia has over 2,000 licensed daycare centers and group homes, and over 5,000 family daycare providers.
The average cost in the state for child care for babies, I believe, is about $55 a week. For other children, it's a little bit less than that. Of course, that ranges very widely. In South Georgia, one can get child care still for about $25 a week, and then in the metropolitan areas, the charges go up as high as $150 a week.
There are a lot of people who live a middle-class lifestyle who have found themselves single parents, either through divorce or the death of a spouse, suddenly find themselves the primary, breadwinner, and need child care. But the cost of child care averages at about $3,000 a year for one child. So if you have, 2 children and you're working as a secretary and even in a company that, has concern for its employees and pays fairly decent wages, you still can't make that budget.
I think that we're always conscious of our price that we charge. We know that our customer is middle America, mom and dad, and we're always conscious of finding ways to keep our costs down so we can keep the costs down for parents. So it might mean that we have to find companies that will give us better prices in terms of educational equipment or in terms of food, that kind of thing. So being conscious of it, I guess, is the best way that we can keep our price affordable. We, of course, want to provide the best environment that we can for children, and that does cost money. I guess my fear as a parent, perhaps, is that at some point the affordability is going to become more of an issue than it is today, and that child care, quality child care, is going to be taken out of the reach of the working parent.
Most of our parents, 90% are low, medium income, single head of household female. And they just find it hard. If they don't qualify for subsidized care, it's almost impossible for them to really maintain on a consistent basis the fees necessary for child care.
Georgia ranks second in the nation in the number of female-headed families who live near or below the poverty level, earning less than $9,500 a year.
If somebody stops long enough to hear what a child goes through living in a shelter, what a teenager goes through coming home from school to a shelter, ashamed to let peers know where they live, not able to invite somebody home or hang up a coat or have a stereo or have anything that belongs to them that they can protect and own. If people hear that and get into it, they respond and they are brokenhearted about it. We just did a quick study for DHR in the spring, and we projected, based on our monthly census, that at the end of 1991 there will have been 4,600 children coming out of homelessness needing full-day daycare in the metro Atlanta area alone. What happens with mothers who get a job and want to work and are in a shelter? The first month they're faced with rent and the cost of child care. After they get out, something has to go. They can't pay both on a minimum wage income. So either the children go from having good child care while they were homeless to being latchkey kids with no child care.
Very few child care centers offer care with fees based on a sliding scale. Openings for children in centers that do are limited, and most have long waiting lists. Very few offer tuition scholarships. Through state and federal assistance programs, some funding is allocated to subsidize child care for eligible low-income families.
Last fiscal year, we were averaging at the end of the year more than 21,000 children per month that we assisted in payments for their child care. And with the additional money that we get this year, we probably can add possibly another 10,000 children who will be having some kind of assistance. Now, if you look at 250,000 children who might need that kind of assistance, then you recognize that there's very little that the state is doing.
Middle-income families in our society are definitely falling through the system. There are programs available for families that are at poverty and just above poverty. But once you reach that certain plateau, then you're not eligible for federal and state subsidy. And that's one of the beauties of programs like Sheltering Arms that receives funding through United Way, because we use our United Way and our other community funds that we from other contributors to help subsidize for those middle-income families that otherwise would be falling through the cracks.
Another segment that falls through the cracks is special needs children, children with disabilities.
3 daycare centers in Atlanta, just normal daycare centers, agreed to keep her for $250 per week. That's to pay a registered nurse to be on staff to take care of a handicapped child.
When a family is seeking child care or seeking a developmental program which also provides child care so that this family can work and cannot find it, they are under a great deal of stress, I guess needless to say. And the stress becomes really important to them in that they must continue to work because they need the health insurance in order to support this child with medical needs, this child with very special needs, and yet they're not able to locate a facility. And what they may do is seek assistance from our early intervention staff across the state through a case management service, but once and again, if the programs don't exist, this family will eventually be stressed to the point that they will seek some much more restrictive type of service, such as our state hospitals.
Recently, Congress took what probably is the most dramatic step toward a systematic public policy that we do need to pay attention as a society to who is minding our kids, who is supervising children when the parents are increasingly in the workforce, either because there's only one parent in the family or because it takes 2 wages to make ends meet.
The last time Congress authorized a comprehensive child care program was 50 years ago, during World War II for children of Rosie the Riveter, women working in the war effort. In 1989, the ABC bill, the Act for Better Child Care, was introduced. For over a year and a half, the House, Senate, and White House battled and debated over taking care of children. Finally, a compromise child care package was agreed upon by all parties, and in November of 1990, President Bush signed it into law. The package included a 3-year, $2.5 billion authorization for the Child Care and Development Block Grant.
It would be more than $20 million for our state, which will probably increase by about 40% the amount of money we have available for helping with child care. We hope that this additional emphasis on child care will allow us to link together, for example, a federal program called Head Start, link that with other resources so that a child can get a full day's care, appropriate care, when that's needed for that particular family.
Head Start programs are generally half-day or part-day programs that are not traditionally considered as child care or daycare. The thrust of Head Start is to provide early educational experiences to 3- and 4-year-olds in preparation for school, and to combine other social services to the family to help them achieve self-sufficiency. Since its inception in 1964, more than 11 million children, predominantly below the poverty level, have benefited from Head Start. Currently, only 1/5 of the eligible children are being reached.
This next year, since we have now grown so that Head Start is part of a complex of child care and child development programs, it's now a piece of a much larger picture, and the larger picture is trying to help disadvantaged families become economically self-sufficient. Along that vein, the Administration for Children and Families was formed on April 15th, 1991, by Dr. Louis Sullivan, who is Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. And of course, he's a native Georgian. I have characterized this formation of the Administration for Children and Families, which is actually 2 federal agencies merged together, as a stroke of domestic policy genius. It takes all of the programs in the federal government focused on families and children and put them into a single federal oversight agency. Over the past 20 years, the focus has shifted so that we now look at whole families and looking at ways to put the service delivery systems and the programs together so that they make sense and so that families can find their way off AFDC and other forms of aid and into the world of self-sufficiency.
Head Start, when it's done properly, has been very successful. We know it can make a difference. And yet it doesn't usually start until the child's 3 years old. And we've already, lost, 3 of the most important years.
A lot of people don't equate what goes on later in life with what happens early in life. But those of us in the early childhood end of the profession know that what we do in the first 6 years of life sets the stage for all behavior that follows. And children who do not get a quality beginning play catch-up forever.
Instead of caring for them when they're children and need Head Start or full-day daycare, we'll arrest them when they're 12 or 13 or 14 and they've gotten into drugs or some other compensatory activity. And we'll house them in another system, which is not cost-effective and not productive and certainly not humane.
Prevention is anywhere from 4 times to 10 times less in actual dollars that the taxpayer puts out. If you have if you have a youngster, just your typical prison system, we're talking about $25,000, $30,000. There's enough money right now to put a lot of the prisoners right straight through Harvard without, and if they graduated, they would be putting something like $65 billion back into the economy instead of sucking out this amount of money to be incarcerated. Down the road, it's so expensive.
Every year in our country, 500,000 teenage girls have babies. What does the future hold for these children when the mother is ill-equipped educationally and emotionally to be the role model?
We find that young girls who become pregnant, which is a real problem with at-risk kids, they become pregnant, and the traditional pattern is within less than 2 years, they're expecting a second child and they are permanently out of school. The dropout rate for females who become pregnant is nearly 100%.
And in an attempt to break the cycle, pilot programs are being initiated to keep the students in school, provide parenting courses, and care for the babies. Programs like the one at the City of Decatur High School through the Fraser Child Development Center.
Now, do all of you talk to your children while you're eating and they're eating? Do you try to have some kind of communication with them? Right, and even if they're not old enough to talk back, they're listening to everything that we say. I was telling one of the students yesterday, her baby's asleep a lot of the
As soon as they find out they're pregnant, they have counseling and they have support. They are enrolled in a course that, of course, their option, but they're enrolled in the course which helps them become a part of the program. The young man, if there's a male involved in this who will admit that it's a parent, we try to get this person involved also so that they go through this program, get them into the center to take care of the children when the children are born a certain amount of time each day. They have to bring their children. They can't leave them home with mom to take care of.
And it's been hard for the past 9 months, so, but it's getting easy by the day. Before it was ready, I had a hard time getting somebody to keep him because my mama had some days to work and then some days she had to take off to keep him for me to come to school, so it's been a big help.
So when you come to school and you've got your book bag and you've got a dress caught in your slip and you've got pablum all over the front of you, it doesn't look real appealing to other youngsters to get pregnant. Having children is not really a game anymore.
Preparing children for the future is not a game. It's serious business. Along with the increasing need for early education and affordable care for all children comes the question of quality. The type of care and experiences children are receiving during the day from someone other than a parent. Child care professionals are concerned about this. They have been pushing for increased emphasis on staff qualifications and training, wages and benefits for workers, and enhanced educational programming. What standards do we set for child care, and how does it impact the child?
I knew from their reaction that they were comfortable and they were clean and seemed to be learning, and that thrilled me that was something they were going to get out of something that I had to do. I have to work, and so they had to go to some kind of child care.
What's important to me is to be able to put my kids into a good environment, a good social environment for them. We looked around, met with a lot of different people, a lot of the daycare workers at different places in the area. We wanted to feel comfortable with them in the way that they would be keeping our kids during the day, the things that they'd be teaching them, the way that our kids would socialize with the other kids at the centers.
Very good, C. What sound does the letter C make?
I guess as I go about my job and looking at kinder care centers, I look at an environment that I feel comfortable having my children in. Of course, a given to me in any child care center is that it's clean, that they have regular sanitation routines to keep germs